When StarCraft II Wings of Liberty was released in summer of 2010, it was a terrible time to be a Zerg player. The map pool was ridiculous. It had Steppes of War in it, which if you don't know, Steppes of War is the map in StarCraft II history with the shortest rush distance ever. The joke was that their siege tanks could hit your natural from their natural. Brutal map for Zerg. You can still select that one if you have StarCraft 2 installed still. Lol. You can select that on custom games and play that with your buddies and really see what I mean. That's one cool thing about StarCraft 2 is every map in the history of the game is playable. You just have to search it up in the custom game tab. So this match is really interesting because it is from the early 2011 era, March of 2011. And I am sort of continuing to follow the career path of my favorite player ever, Greg Fields. And I have done all of his GSL games, and that GSL that he was last in was in late January, and this match has occurred in March of 2011. So this is a couple of matches after that. And at the beginning of Wings of Liberty, when Zerg was terrible and could die so easily, and the Queen was a joke, not a joke like it is now where you can literally not have too many of them, but a joke like it was useless, and even though everyone knew creep was good, you couldn't really afford to make more than maybe one Queen to spread creep because the economy ramp up was slower. There were way more aggressive options for the other races to do. The maps were smaller, which if you're sort of new to the game or don't play the Zerg matchups, the reason that rush distance is so important for Zerg as opposed to the other races is that Zerg wants to be making nothing but drones, and then whenever they see an attack coming, then they want to cut drones and make only units. Zerg is the reactive race, and the reason that is because all of Zerg's units come out of the hatchery, whereas if you look at Terran and Protoss, their base structures, the command center and the nexus, consistently can make workers, and they make their attacking units out of different buildings. The barracks, the factory, the gateway. Whereas with Zerg, since everything comes out of the hatch, the Zerg player has a more linear choice. Do I make drones or do I make attacking units? Now, FruitDealer and Idra were the two best players at the very beginning of Wings of Liberty as far as Zerg players go, and along with Trickster, the Protoss player, and MVP, they were the top players in the entire scene and top rated on Korea Ladder. Idra once said that in the beginning of StarCraft 2 it was him and FruitDealer at the top of the ladder, 100 MMR above everyone else, which is insane to think about. And FruitDealer was an astronomically talented player, absolute god of the game who looked untouchable after winning the first GSL. And he won it defending stuff like this, some 2 barracks pressure, and his opponent is ThorZaIN, a Western European player who was basically unknown before this series. And this tournament, the TSL3, would be how ThorZaIN rose to prominence. There would be another Swedish player who was exceptional through Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm. His name, Naniwai, a Protoss player who was known for being brash and outspoken as well as having very good macro. He would make his name in this tournament too, and I'm going to be covering several games from this tournament. Not all of them. I'm going to be looking at some ThorZaIN, some Naniwa, and some Idra. Idra had a really infamous match in this tournament that I think is going to be a really good representation of how flimsy Zerg was. A little bit of a preview for you there, and yes, we will get to see some Idra rage. I know that always brings a smile to your face whenever you get to see a witticism from Greg. But I wanted to cast this game because in the past I casted this hour-and-a-half long special. It's frankly one of my best videos ever, FruitDealer, the first great Korean Zerg. And in that video I cover some of his GSL matches from the very first GSL ever, where Zerg was the weakest and FruitDealer monster moded through that entire tournament and was on a crazy god level. And he's really going to get surprise bitched here like XCal with this Marine move out, because he went over to take the tower, barely missed the Marines, and holy crap, there's 5 Marines at my front door, and Xel'Naga Caverns is so open where that spine crawler does not cover the natural, it only covers a small section. That's more of a I'm going to defend against Hellion spine than it is a catch-all. Xel'Naga Caverns so open that a spine really can't defend in the same way that a map normally is able to be defended with. And we see here slow lings and the spine. This is just brutal. ThorZaIN delaying so much mining, and a baneling nest going down, as well as a lot of lings, as FruitDealer is falling behind here, and a queen dies. Huge. ThorZaIN putting so much pressure on here, and a few things to note. Remember, FruitDealer made his bones dealing with cheeses and defending annoying cheeses, but this is a great use of the map by ThorZaIN. A lot of people think, oh, if a map is open, it only favors Zerg. It's harder for Terran and Protoss to expand. The map being open can be used in an aggressive way with Terran and Protoss too. I remember Ryan State Fizbek doing a 4-gate all-in against Greg Fields way back in 2010 on this map, because again, the natural is so open. If you don't have high ground advantage to defend on top of a ramp, then you can't defend as easily when it's two big wide open chokes. And here FruitDealer says, screw it, I'm too far behind, I'm gonna all in, going for a baneling bust, and the banelings are going to connect onto stem pack and cancel it. But with Hellions out, this is going to fizzle very badly, as ThorZaIN deduced that this was coming. He delayed the mining so severely long that he was able to sort of say to himself, okay, well, I'm ahead, even if he doesn't do a big attack. Like, I've delayed the mining enough where, since my CC is done, I'm going to be okay. And this was the biggest flaw of FruitDealer. Despite using primarily aggressive strategies on his come up, when the maps got a little bigger and the Terran players got a little better, moves like this that honestly a lot of times really shouldn't have worked just ended up never working. As we see, another baneling bust is going to be attempted here. It's going to cancel stem, but FruitDealer doesn't even run in with the lings. He knows that it's no good. And a great little defense there by Marcus Ekloff. Notice that the natural of FruitDealer took quite a thumping, and this was excellent use of the map by the Terran player ThorZaIN. Incredibly intelligent to do that marine move out, because on all the other maps in the pool at this time, like Metalopolis was sort of open too, but it was way easier to defend. The rush distance was longer, but like maps like Crevasse, all of these maps have a much more narrow, easy to defend natural, and moving out with your marines like that is a really big risk, because you can hypothetically run into lings or get caught out and lose the marines, and you want to sort of have the marines to defend your big open natural. But ThorZaIN, because he got map control and pressured early, knew that okay, this is a big wide open natural, and he's not going to be able to defend with just a queen, because the queen sucked, and if he has a spine, I'll just walk around, lol, like the Maginot line. And a nice little adaptation here from our intelligent Zerg player FruitDealer, as he's made a double spine. And really, this is what you had to do on this map if you were going to try to defend against Hellions, is you couldn't rely on one spine. The natural's just way too damn big. And oftentimes you would see that spine way over by that gas, by the backdoor path, because on this map, Xel'Naga Caverns, you see the reeds on the left side of your screen there beneath the income tab. That's like a whole little back path that sort of looks above the third base. If you're a Brood War fan, think about like the main base of Othello, how it sort of finger links out over the natural. And I absolutely love this game because we got to see a foreigner Terran do really well. If you look at the foreigners, and that's for non-Koreans, for those of you who don't know, we really haven't had as many good foreigner Terrans in StarCraft 2 as we've had some of the other races. And it's very common to open Roach on this map because, again, the openness makes Hellions really good. And it looks like FruitDealer is going for a big Roach Bane attack here. And the knock on FruitDealer was, even though he was god level untouchable in Season 1, a lot of like the crazy magician-like stuff that he did sort of ended up not working as much as people got more steady and got better macro and learned more about the game. And FruitDealer was sort of left in the spot where he would still try to do his aggressive maneuvers. He would still try to do these big baneling plays, but as people got better and the maps were a little bit more macro focused and the Terran players weren't necessarily trying to cheese as much as they were and like weren't playing as all in, then yeah, FruitDealer started to fall off. And the knock against him is we see him running across the map with Roachling and losing most of his lings to Blue Flame Hellion. Good control there by ThorZaIN. But the knock against FruitDealer by Artosis and Idra was he would always go Damaga mode. Damaga, the Ukrainian Zerg, would like to go all in, like not like to go all in like they were cheesy, as we see a massive wall here for the Terran player. This attack will just never work in a million years. If you try to do a Roach Bane bust off of creep into that big droopy wall, that's not a depot wall. Look at that. That's a Gosu wall, bro. See, again, that's called playing the map. Imagine if we had Xel'Naga Caverns dropped in the map pool of today. The Protoss and Terran players would see how big that choke was, bitch about it, veto the map, and never even try to learn it. What did ThorZaIN do here? He took advantage of the map structure to use a certain early game build order that garnered him an advantage. As we see a drop occurring here from ThorZaIN. Great play, because whenever the Zerg player opts to go Roach, he's going to spend his gases on Roach. That's going to delay the Spire, and it means that you can really abuse someone with medevac. And remember, the Queen had lower ground and anti-air range at the time, so Zerg isn't going to have 6 Queens roaming around that are really good at warding off medevacs. Roaches are running around, but remember, there's no Ravager at this time. It was considered bad and sort of brutal for Zerg if you had to open Roach. And remember, he's opening Roach to defend against Blue Flame Hellions here. And a lot of tanks. This is an absolute ground and pound army, a couple Marauders in there. This is the sort of army that just eviscerates a Roach army. So you open Roach, then you have a bunch of slow, shitty Roaches that don't transition well and can't turn into Ravagers. And then this is what happens. Once the Terran player gets medevacs, you're in a huge power trough. One of the most annoying things in all of StarCraft 2 is when you're Zerg and you fell behind, whether because you got aggressed upon or you opted to go Roach. But whenever you're stuck on Roach tech and the Terran player has medevacs and he's dropping one spot and running away and dropping another, and you can't do anything about it, that is so vexing. Especially if you're bad at the game and like don't have the APM to properly split 2 armies and you're getting supply block. I mean, that is just so frustrating. Because you just feel like the Terran knows too that like, oh, he doesn't have anything that can kill me as far as punishing my medevacs. And we see FruitDealer also knows that. He saw how many freaking tanks there were, and he's just going to do a big counterattack. ThorZaIN not sieged up at home, and suddenly ThorZaIN is going to be forced to pull back a bit, sieging the tank as he moves his 3rd base out. But this is one thing about Roaches, is like, they're not good units. They don't do a lot of damage. You can walk 30 of them into your opponent's natural and literally kill nothing significant. And again, the Ravager is such a big deal, not just because of the utility it provides. Is nice from T-Funk, as he was nicknamed, to have a barracks protecting that little back path, is that little back path would really be used for 2 things: to drop bio on the high ground above the 3rd, and to run Lings in behind and get into your natural. So ooh, burrowed Banelings. So FruitDealer was always like a deeply tactical player that loved Banelings, and we can see FruitDealer's just going to try to lure these Marines. He's probably going to lose like some Ling Bane to try to bait Marcus into going over the Banes. Go over the Banes. Bang! There it is. Like, Jesus, son. An absolutely phenomenal hit. And this is the sort of stuff that FruitDealer would do. He would do these moxie-filled tactical maneuvers to help get him out of sticky situations. This was a guy who was dropped in a spot like the Zergs of 2002, where it's like, oh, none of these maps have easy to take naturals. Sometimes the 3rd is nearly impossible. The other races have a ton of aggressive options. He would use Baneling drops. He would use burrowed Banelings. He would sneak bases sometimes. This guy pulled out every trick in the book and invented a bunch of new ones. And there was a reason that he was so loved, and there was a reason that whenever you look at his VODs, even years later, it's like he's doing stuff that people should be doing, like getting burrow, and then when you get dropped, burrowing the drones. Burrowed Banelings. Guys, it's like 2023 Legacy of the Void, and you still don't see burrowed Banelings enough. And FruitDealer did this at a time when Zerg was terrible. Right when the game came out, it looked like Zerg was just going to be in a brutal spot, as FruitDealer finally has Mutas out, and it's 20 minutes in the game, and he can, for the first time, defend medevac harass. And it looked like Zerg was never going to win. It looked so hard to win with Zerg, and FruitDealer was almost like Neo from the Matrix in the way that he won. the deeply improbable, ridiculous ways that he would win that were not easy to replicate and looked like they weren't going to work even when we were watching them live. But he was doing so many different unique things and microing so well and just being tactically brilliant to the point where he was way different than everyone else. And then FruitDealer started to sort of fall off as players developed more and understood how to play a defensive macro style better. That's one thing about StarCraft, is the players are always improving. As you see nice Baneling drops as he's sort of baiting that base. You know that base is going to be attacked. It's very, you can see he has more stuff burrowed even further south. This is what I'm talking about, is like FruitDealer knows he's way behind. He's been behind since minute 5 in the game, and he's doing every little thing he can, as we see a scan clearing more burrowed banelings, and he's trying to come in and backstab these tanks. As though a Thor is out. Remember, the Thor does bonus damage to light units and splash, and he has +2. If you were diligent about getting ground mech attack upgrades in this era, that was very important because it made your siege tanks really pack a punch, but more importantly, it made the Thor just decimate mutas. And we see aggression at this dinky little third base, and half of the Marine Marauder die. And this is just a great representation of sort of the fall of FruitDealer, because despite that god tier S-class legendary performance in the first GSL, a literal miracle run, he never really was the same afterwards. And he, as we see, great defense there. This is a big part of why sim sitting is so important, as the Terran player ThorZaIN has taken one of the most open naturals in StarCraft 2 history and made it a Terran defender's paradise in addition to the third at the PF. You know, a lot of Terrans would have just gotten backstabbed by the Lings going up on that little back path. They would have lost a mineral line to that. They wouldn't have had tanks out mid-map choking off the gold. ThorZaIN has been playing so incredibly well, and this is what I was talking about, is when there's this many tanks, like, you just can't ever get your banelings to connect. And when the map is much more claustrophobic and the bases are way harder to defend, it's very easy for Terran to punch out a base, stay defended, and gain a little edge. Move over, punch another base while they're doing a drop, gain an edge. ThorZaIN has played this nearly perfectly, but I think the thing that makes me most happy about this game is the things that ThorZaIN have done have been like map specific. He's not just playing well, not getting supply block, making enough unit producing facilities, but the little Marine move out on this map specifically, the incredible Sim City on this map specifically, it really limited what FruitDealer wanted to do. FruitDealer got a little bit behind, and big surprise, he got frustrated and wanted to all in. Now that worked for him for the first few months of the game, but whenever Nest T started to get really good was GSL Season 2. That's the one where he beat Marine King. When I say GSL Season 2, I mean the second one ever. Like Season 2 of The Office Casino Night shit. Way back in the day when I was still in high school. And I'm sure some of you were even younger than that. Is a bunch of mutas go down and holy shit, FruitDealer GG's. So to bounce it back a touch and wrap up my thoughts, FruitDealer was a guy who really innovated and was just incredible and not like any other player. Like, there are some players who innovate with macro in terms of, like, in the beta, Idra showed, like, okay, this is like the most effective way to try to take your natural. I think it was like 15 pool, 15 hatch. It was called like the Idra build in the beta. But FruitDealer was like Neo in the Matrix, where he was like, this is how I beat Terran. Baneling drops, like, who was one of the first people to use the fungal and then run Banes into him. He would put the Bane rain on, but then he really got into this Damaga mode where he loved to be aggressive and, oh shit, I'm a little bit behind, throw down the Roach Horn, throw down the Bane Nest, and we saw a huge scan in the mid game that saw, okay, he's still on hatch tech, he's all inning me, let me get my big wall up, let me get a lot of tanks up. And this is really the fall of FruitDealer. This TSL would be the last sort of dying gasp of the FruitDealer. A guy who, if you ask people at the end of GSL Season 1, it was like, this guy's going to be good for years. And this was a guy that would end up sort of retiring very quickly. This guy really sort of retired in the early part of 2012. And at the beginning of the game, it was like him and Nest-T were the best Zergs, and then Nest-T sort of mastered the methodical macro style and showed Zergs like how to be defensive. And for FruitDealer, a lot of his games looked like this, where he would just try to be aggressive and it wouldn't work. So I hope you enjoyed that, and you guys should sub for more. I'm going to be covering more of these TSL games. Probably going to do the next FruitDealer one. Sub for more.